I've done some work in Halong Bay as well, and it's become very, very sort of mass tourism. And it's partly because the governments are just selling the permits, you know, they're allowing access. And it's just creating this congestion and issues. People walking all over the sites and destroying it. So your question is about how do you change that behaviour? I guess some of it is providing information from multiple perspectives. It might be, video material on the way over to the site, explaining the impacts and the issues. Perhaps through the interpretation of the site. It might be through signage or tour guides. And it might even be a way to use that visit to change people's behaviour. So I've got colleagues at the moment who are looking at that, how a visit to a national park or a protected area can actually be used to change people's behaviour when they go back home. So it is possible, but I think it needs a lot of thought, and I think some tourists are just going to be blocking it out. The case of Halong Bay, I mean, they're drinking all the way over, and they're not interested in some of the environmental issues. So I think for some tourists, you're not going to be able to sort of change their behaviours, except for enforcing them. Saying don't litter or don't climb on that rock. And when I've been at places, the guides haven't enforced the rules. And I've been disappointed with that. So I think some tourists are going to ignore it anyway. But I think through communicating to them before they arrive, through tour guides, through interpretation, through punishment, enforcement, is all part of the plan, I think, to deal with it.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think the governments, and especially in the tourism sector areas, I won't say which country it is, but it has big temples. But pretty much there was a desire to get more tourism turnstiles to turn, because the revenue stream for individuals was much better the more people that went through the turnstile for certain people. There was not really any thought given to the number of people that would show up at the same place at the same time. Also, with the increase in the mass tourism buses, it's not about education, it's about showing up and getting a picture of yourself there and then getting back on the bus. They're not there for the experience. So the question becomes, do you want to go on the discount tour where it's you and 50 people in the bus, or do you want the true educational experience and go with a higher priced, smaller tour? The question becomes, government's going to have to manage it in some manner, local government, and put restrictions on it. And back to the education, the volunteerism too, there's also people who are exploiting that. And so there's one company that shall go unnamed, but they basically bring over young Americans and Canadians and use them for slave labor and then sell them tour packages to go tour the area after. So, volunteer tourism's got some great things, but there are people who will try and exploit that too. So it's transparency, and it's just getting it out from under. Long-winded, but.
All right, thank you. What about the second question? How to keep it micro? Who's going to reply?
Can you elaborate on the question a little bit so I understand the context and the nature of the question?
My experience here, is that we want to empower, of course, because the small farmers, and you're talking about transition, in order for them to be part as well of the development of the countries and not to be left behind. However, if you focus on micro economy, or how when you bring people in, and then it starts to be successful, how can you, which kind of system do you put in place in order to keep that micro and not becoming bigger, and then you are losing your objective?
I'm not sure what can be done to stop market forces. It's challenging. So I'm not sure what you could do to keep it micro. I guess if it's expanding and growing, that could be a good thing as well. So I'm not sure how you try to restrict the growth.
Again, it's local empowerment. There's a Hmong village in northern Thailand. They decided that the only way they would keep their way of life was to restrict it. So they built a nice little hotel overnight, but they only had 4 rooms. And they did it because they said, well, we don't want to go bigger because it's our village. And the money goes to the village. So individuals get some money, but most of it goes into the village fund. But just a note, and this is a technology innovation note, the shaman in the village, in Hmong culture, it's bad spirits if you go to the shaman's house and he's not home, you can't have him as a shaman anymore. But since everyone has cell phones in the village now, they call him up and say, are you going to be home in 10 minutes? Because I'd like to drop by. So the technology innovation now is kind of built into this, I'll make sure the shaman's home so I can keep him as my shaman. So it's the local, and they've all decided they want to stay small.
I think I misinterpreted your question, so I apologise. I thought you were talking about an individual business. You can't really stop any of them growing, but I agree with Dom's point. I think the community might have to agree and decide on what direction they're going to head in, and if they're going to go for high-yield tourists, and make some decisions at the community level, and then everyone has to abide by that. And often there's local tourism associations and a collaborative network to help drive that. So I apologise, I'm misinterpreting your question.
Thank you.
All right. Professor Chung here would like to give some remarks.
Just comment. I'm not an expert in tourism, but I'm studying social entrepreneurship. And social entrepreneurship can be combined into tourism. In Korea, we have a very famous social enterprise in tourism called the Travelers Net. They have very strong principles. They try to combine tourism with education, economy, and environment. So there is some principle. Based on the principle, they design the tour program. So even though that is a little more expensive, there are many students who are also they link with the community. They educate the community and they educate the students. So I think that is one of the successful.
Very great. Perhaps in terms of that, you keeping it micro, there's some villages would like to keep it micro just to keep it stay natural. Then we have some villages in Bali, where there's a Panglipuran, for example. They restrict foreign or tourists to come because they want to keep it. They want to keep Bali, the Balinese ambience, the houses, the culture. So it's not really, become a different Bali. So perhaps is that what you mean? Yeah, some village would like to try to keep their natural environment that way. And what they're doing in Bali now is involving the local government. They're very, very strict, and it's actually not exposing the village for commercial purpose. Did that help you? Yeah. All right. If you have a short question, I can take 2 at one time. All right. Identify yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Ira from Prasetiya. I would like to ask for Professor Don. I'm interested in your transformative model of government, NGO, and business as a catalyst. My question is how you can measure that relationship between the 3 parts, between the 3 parties. Thank you.
Just one question. Okay, can I take another short question, please? Yes, Ibu Yin.
I'd like to ask Professor John. I'm Teresa Leong of Prasetiya, and I wanted to ask because in one of your slides you said that there is an anti-corporation mentality in Korea. So can you please explain what that means? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Please, first one, is it from?
In the model and the interactions of those models, you can track that by a number of different methodologies. Some of it is simply done in interviews with people from the various entities and so forth to talk about how do they view and how do they interact with. There are also whether or not there's formal relationships or informal relationships. What we try and do in those models is to identify where contacts occur and then would influence relationships. As one of the great sayings that I like is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so it's crucial to be able to at least try and measure some of those pieces. And if we can't get objective measures, which a lot of people love, we go out and we find subjective measures through interview-based kind of methodologies. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, the anti-cooperation mentality is linked with the very rapid development of the economy, because in developed countries, the wealth has been created through the generations. But in Korea, within a very short period of time, for example 30, 40 years, when people from the mom and shop and then become the global company, a very rapid pace. So during the process, as I mentioned, the bipolarization has been strengthened. The poor people, the rich people, the gap is combined. So I mean the benefit of the economic development was not equally distributed. The rich people got most of them. So the many people, they are not rich, have some sentiment that maybe the wealth creation process is not, in some cases, not acceptable in that way. So still there is, two double line. They would like to become, for example, for his children, they would become the member of the large corporation. But in some other sense, they have some anti, the corporation mentality there. So that is, I think this is become, economy has become the social issues. So how to, to make a remedy for this one, that is another challenge for this one.
Oui. All right. Yes.
Sorry.
So is there actually a feeling that it's not suitable to work at the corporation, but what about all those big corporations?
I think maybe now, the large corporation follow the old global standard. But during the last development period, maybe the work, the young generation worked very hard with the very poor, lower wage, etc. We have that kind of history. So maybe some people can argue on the development process, because some people become rich very rapidly. There must be some, for example, some bribe, etc. So they are applying the very high, standard for the past history of development. So I think, it is not just the economic issue, but some people, especially the people, we have still the long discussion regarding the maybe growth or distribution, what should become first. So this is linked with that kind of issues. So even the larger corporations are working very hard also, they have a lot of CSR activities, or really they are making social values. But some other group still have a very strong objection for the larger corporation.
Any more questions from the floor? All right. Okay, file yourself, please.
I addressed the question to Professor Lat.
Your name and you're from?
I'm Christy from Jasindo, state-owned company.
Yeah.
And in terms of developing tourism entrepreneurship, and how do you suggest to manage preserved environment? As we know, Indonesia at the developing stage of tourism, and the consequences is the unbalancing environment in especially touristic area, and it is a huge issue in our country, in my country. And as we all know, it happened in Labuan Bajo and Tebe, and also in Tanjung Benoa, for example. So how do you see that? Thank you so much.
All right, can I take another question, please, if there is any? If not, I give to Professor Don, is it? Yeah.
One of the, and back to my point, I'm not sure if there is ecotourism anymore. I look back on some of my early sojourns or trips into pristine wilderness, and then 20 years later there's lots and lots of tourists, mass tourists there. So I almost feel like, boy, it was my fault. But it's really up to putting in place restrictions with local governments, local people, and the national government to be able to actually think about how to control and preserve. Again, into Cambodia, the first time I was there was one hotel. There's now, I think the number is 148 hotels, all of them sinking wells, all of them drawing water out, so the water table is going down. Here in Indonesia, as the islands are looked at as ways to have tourism and more of an experience, the orangutans and so forth, it's really a difficult thing because people see the money from, we can bring in 50 tourists, and what if we brought in 500 because we're making this, and if we do a 5,000? So it's about demonstrating to local governments and local people yield management value, so that if we can charge a tourist $5,000 for this experience, we can bring one versus 500 who spend $10. Now, that does sort of raise the ethical issue: is this only for rich people? Or shouldn't everyone be able to do that? What we've done in a couple of places is use some of the money that comes from the rich tourism sector to do specialized tours for like local children, and they can then go visit places that they wouldn't be able to. But once the mass tourism market opens up, it's very, very difficult to get a cap on it. In Cambodia, for example, again, there are so many people at the same place at the same time that the high-end tourists, a number of them are saying, why do I want to go there? Because the experience isn't what I'm willing to pay for. So they're looking for new places. It goes back to the locals, it goes back to local government, and the national government has to support that. Because if someone is facilitating letting them build a new 400-room hotel on an endangered reef, then that's out of the hands of the locals.
I think
Not much more to add to that. It's a challenge, but I think to identifying sacrificial sites, identifying areas which can sustain, and perhaps you want to divert tourists to particular places, is a good idea. Halong Bay is a good example. Most tourists go on the trip to a particular cave system. It's heavily overrun, people are touching everything, but that's a sacrificial site. There are many other parts of Halong Bay where the high yield tourists are paid for and there's smaller numbers. A similar thing in Australia with the Great Barrier Reef. 80% of tourists go to 20% of the reef. Sacrificial sites are identified that can perhaps withstand a bit of the damage, and then other places that are more sensitive have a higher level of protection. I think permit systems and things like that are really important so that the tour operators don't grow out of control. The other thing is obviously you can do some site hardening and things like that. But yeah, it's tricky because obviously the dollar signs light up in the back of the minds of the government. It's difficult. But those are some options.
Perhaps you could also share about your knowledge about ecotourism in New Zealand, perhaps?
Look, I mean, there are examples of slow tourism where people want to take their time, and one example is cycling tourism. A lot of people are into cycling, not motorbikes like here, cycling push bikes. So these are some niche tourism, sort of segments where there's not the use or reliance on motorised transport. So that's good, but how are they getting to New Zealand? Well, they're flying, aren't they? Yeah, they're flying. So I agree with Don. I mean, there are some examples of good eco-tourism practices, but they're becoming fewer and fewer because people are, as Don said, eco-tourism is opening up areas to mass tourism. If it's not properly managed, there's going to be problems.
All right, because other countries have also implement educational ecotourism. Instead, go to agricultural sites, kind of educating the visitors to come and take care of the environment. So I guess to summarize what we've been talking, there are different ways of doing tourism. Yeah, not only selling the Halong Bay beach, make it dirty and things like that, but you can also go for education and tourism. Yeah, realistic. Okay. Thank you for the question. Very interesting. Any other question? We can have one more question, isn't it?
Is it, can we have coffee? Is that the question?
Oh, is that right? Mandy, do we have time? Yes, okay. Please, identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Chandra from Universitas Indonesia PGRI. This is question from Professor Zhong Devi. Yes, in your presentation that you said that for tentative evaluation on entrepreneurship in Korea, that you said that entrepreneurship was big. Why this happened in Korea? Could you more tell more detail about this? Thank you.
Yeah, if you look at the trend of Silicon Valley, for example, the total number of investment increased very rapidly until the year 2000, and then just collapsed, and then growing slowly. I think that happened in Korea. I think that in general, it should be like this. But during the government promotion and IMF bailout with several issues, the entrepreneur has been boom in rapidly. So it goes very rapidly. Then maybe after one wave, for example, at the beginning, some entrepreneur has ideas. The idea comes from the more than 10 years experience, and then they make success. Then what the next? Then nothing to prepare. So after one cycle, then we don't have anything for the second wave. So this is going to be the left cross and then rise and drop. So we experienced that kind of drop and the year 2000, and many people lost money, many people lost something. So that caused the social atmosphere into the other directions. For example, very active. Then after we see many failures, then the social culture changed into the more conservative. And then this is like a pendulum. So we are making that kind of very hot and very cold, and then now we are making some stable growth. So especially during last 10 years, many people are talking about the Korean entrepreneurship diminishing, especially young generation become more conservative. They would like to become government officials. They need just a more stable job rather than more entrepreneurial activity. But now, after 10 years, there is something changed. It is no more stable. So maybe the new kind of entrepreneur, we call them the venture 3, that is 3.0. We are looking for the new kind of entrepreneurship based on the attitude or the interest of the young generation. So that is evolving and increasing, decreasing, and then we have that kind of experience in a short period of time. Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we conclude the session. Okay. I'll just briefly summarize our second session here. Interesting to hear about innovation. I hear innovation doesn't come just like that. It starts from crisis. So there's always sense of crisis, and then people are forced to or motivate themselves to get out of the crisis and become innovative, isn't it? First, that is first. Second, don't be ashamed of imitating. Yeah, so start with imitation, because also I think the word imitation has a negative meaning to many people. You imitate, but it's okay to start from imitation, but then you go out from the imitation and then create something you call creative destruction, Professor Chong. Yeah, from the Korean lessons, what I found interesting is you mentioned about the society, which is based on Confucian scholar. So education is number one. So perhaps that is the key characteristic of the society. And another interesting point you mentioned also, so because education is important, the smartest people go to government sector. I'm not sure if it works the same in Indonesia. I shouldn't comment on that, but in terms of Korea, it looks like the government people are supported by smart people. Yeah, and the government role is also important. There is respect to government people, you mentioned. Yeah, there is respect to scholars. So the society works in such a way, there is a learning culture. Yeah, you want to learn all the time. And then the third thing that is interesting, you said success should be celebrated. There's always, when you go out of the crisis and you're successful, it should be publicly celebrated. So it's the victory of the whole group, not just individual. All right. In the other, you also mentioned the hero model of entrepreneurship, which is you become followers, but there is a role model. Yeah, the success one should be the motivator of the others to follow, to be successful as well. So, and the last one is the private sector. Yeah, the private sector is very strong in Korea. That's what we can learn from the Korean experience. And then from the tourism, should I just conclude into one? Yeah? Okay. It's interesting, the popular word today, the keyword is belusukan. Yeah. Donna has practiced several times to say belusukan. What was the first time you mentioned? It's blasakan or something? I think only Japanese can pronounce it well. Belusukan, it's not blasakan. So belusukan seems to be the keyword in this seminar. What it means is you have to go down there to the market to listen to the noises. Yeah, and then as a leader, don't just stand up there in the chair behind the desk, but go down there and then talk to people, and you get an idea what is it that they need from you, including your example of tank shops in Singapore. And then from the tourism sector, tourism has only been lately getting a lot of attention as one of the economic drivers. Yeah? But in some countries, tourism can be the main economic sector. So I understand New Zealand has a lot of reliance on tourism, but every country has different kind of tourism. In the Asian sector, it's also fragmented into. There is one, I heard, spiritual tourism, something like that, to haunted houses, something like that. So again, it's very highly contextual. You can sell tourism depending on the country, You can't just imitate like that. Yeah, you have to adjust it in a way that works in a particular society. Okay. Any other addition you'd like to conclude? Yeah. All right. So I give the mic to Mary. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lali, for concluding. Please applause for the speakers today. And we would like to give the keynote speakers a